I'm Daniel Steinberg, and you're listening to The Maggid Method, a new podcast about Drashas. Today, we're joined by Rabbi Noah Cheses, Rabbi of Young Israel in Sharon, Massachusetts. Enjoy. Well, I got to share with you something so funny that I saw. So I was doing a little bit of the research for the just for the interview this morning. So I guess you guys had like some big Boston rally, or not a rally, but I guess a support. So there was an article in the Globe, and so just this popped up. There's a picture of you for sale on Getty Images. Did you know?
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I got to show it to you. You get a kick out of it. Hang on one second. Let me see if I can share my screen with you. There we go. $500, and it could be yours.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I had no clue. I wonder who took that picture. I guess they covered that rally. And they wrote an article about it. There was like 5,000 people at the Boston Commons. So it was a lot of people, and it was a special solidarity effort. But it's funny because I asked them if they could send me the pictures, and they said that they can't.
I guess,
but I guess I could buy them.
Right. It's funny to have to buy a picture of yourself that you can take it, any day for free. But that's really funny. Cool. Okay, so doing research, I discovered that I guess you spent a lot of time on campus before you became a congregational assistant rabbi, and then you became a senior rabbi. So what it seemed like from the college time is that the main work is done like one-to-one, right? There's a lot of like deep relationship forming, and when you transition to congregational rabbi, there's also one-to-one work, but there's also an opportunity to reach people as a unit, as an entire congregation. Maybe the difference between going deep versus going wide. So I wanted to get a little bit of a feeling from you as to what is the speaking platform that Shabbos morning, or Shabbos Shuva, or the big time speaking slots, those prime time slots. What do those represent to you in your abilities to reach your people?
So when I took, I guess, public speaking at Yale University in my time at Smicha there, I remember one of the professors, his name was Gerald August, I'm pretty sure his name was. He made a comment to me, to the class, that just stuck. And this was like in 2006 when I was in Smicha there, so it was a while ago.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that a good drasha emerges out of life lived together, and then shapes life lived together. And what I understand that to mean is that there are experiences that a community has together that teach certain lessons or point to certain moral sort of values. And when people have experienced those, they are sort of easy to reach. And the goal of a good sermon is to elevate them to a point of consciousness where we can appreciate it, and then reflect on it, and maybe fine tune it, make it a little bit more emotionally resonant, and then paint a picture of how it could shape the future months ahead in terms of commitment to Torah mitzvot, commitment to a certain cause, or building a certain type of midah or character. And so what I see the Drasha slot to be is exactly that, which is most of my drashot, begin with stories that happen within the community from, the week before, or in the months before, and then it's funneled through some some narrative or some insight into the parsha, oftentimes through a Rashi or a Ramban, and then I forecast it into the future and say this is what it could look like if we all commit to X.
A vision.
Yeah. So just to give a very brief example, that's I have a short-term memory, so I can only think about what I did last week. But obviously everyone is just an anxious mess over what is happening in Eretz Yisrael right now, and so the hostage situation is really keeping us from sleeping and and concentrating and holding on to our sort of routines. And so I spoke about how Abraham goes to take Lot back from Sodom in last week's parsha, and so everyone has had that shared common experience about worrying what's going on with our our brothers and sisters who are in captivity right now. And then I just shared that at the beginning of the parsha, Lot is termed Ben Achiv, the nephew of Avram. But then when Avram actually goes into Sodom to retake his nephew, it's Achiv without the Ben Achiv. And so the Mefarshim obviously ask why the shift in the family relationship. And so I think it was the Rabbeinu Bechaya who says, like, at a time of Eit Zara, at a time of desperation, close relationships become even closer.
Wow.
And so, the tie-in, of course, was obvious. The message was clear to all that, there's unprecedented achdut in Eretz Yisrael right now, and we need to do more of that here. And these are the ways we can do it, right? So this week is the Shabbat Project, the 10th anniversary of what Chief Rabbi Goldstein, started about inviting non-observant, families to your Shabbat table. So this is a golden opportunity, right? So that was sort of the arc of the Drasha, and sort of just reflecting on it now that it fit well into sort of that typology or that kind of model that I got all the way back, when I was just a student, imagining what a pulpit and what a sermon would be in terms of a good drasha emerging from life shared together and then affecting life shared together.
Amazing. Yeah. Let me ask you, how do you see, have you evolved? I mean, everyone obviously evolves, but sometimes maybe you look back on something that you said in a previous year and said, wow, that I don't think I've moved past that, or I've gone deeper than that. Do you notice that happening with yourself?
Certainly. I always try to keep good files of my ideas. Right behind me, I have a filing cabinet, sort of ancient form of filing things away.
Do we
and I have sort of moved on a little bit to Google, Docs, which are easier because they're searchable. But I pull out, my folder on Parshat Vayera, and I can see, from when I became a rabbi in 2009 until now, I have a bunch of my drashot written there. I often find myself coming back to some of the same themes year in, year out. But the way that I package them is very different. Because I try to make them contemporary and current. Sometimes I do have those moments of like, what was I thinking? Like that there's no logic to the flow of that drasha. Like it was just totally, associative, like, and just like haphazardly put together. And then there are other times where like I don't even remember ever giving that, but that's really profound. I'm amazed that I had such depth,
Yeah, that's really funny. Yeah.
So in terms of how I've evolved, I used to be much more careful and disciplined in writing everything out ahead of time. That was sort of the the homiletics course at Yeshiva University that I took was given by this professor August, who was really coming from like the business world. He was a public speaker, and also by Haskell Lookstein from KJ.
Sure.
And Rabbi Lookstein had a very particular kind of, I would say, like method where you write every single word out, and then you read it. And that was something that I did often, and probably the first 5 or 6 years of my pulpit. When I was in Toronto for a few years, I did that a lot. I would say in the last 3 to 4 years, it's rare, if ever, that I write out a drasha. I will do so for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur.
Yeah.
And I actually practice those because I really want to have them, polished. But what I've evolved into is more of this like preaching without notes approach, which is there's a book by Joseph Webb, you're probably familiar, called Preaching Without Notes, where he leans on, with probably it is a more sort of like Christian idea of like prophetic preaching, that you have to be able to tap into the present moment and channel the emotion of the here and the now and sort of broadcast that live.
Yeah.
So there's a technique, of, it's as much about talent as it is about preparation. So you have to write out an outline, and you have to have a roadmap in your head about where you're going. But there's not as much of that sort of like almost academic, like reading, one sentence after the next.
Right.
And so now I'm much more sort of organic in my delivery. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And some of that comes with confidence.
Sure.
Having built up enough sort of drasha nuggets in the bank, and not getting as nervous, like getting up there and having no clue what I'm actually going to say.
Yeah.
I've just sort of figured it out, and some of it, I think, also comes with, but to be honest, a little bit of like trying to find shortcuts among all the other things that I'm juggling, and realizing that the drasha is probably not the most impactful thing that I do.
Right. Right. It feels very significant because there's a spotlight on you, and you feel like it's the most profound part of the week. But it's 10 minutes, and hopefully you try to make an impact. And sometimes people even remember what you say, and then it goes on. Life goes on. But I heard there was a podcast interview with Rabbi David Wolpe, and he said that as profound and as significant as the sermons are, the real moments of transformation happen one-to-one, sitting with someone, grieving with someone, visiting someone in the hospital. And so, sometimes we do get wrapped up in how exciting and thrilling and the spotlight's on us, and showtime. But it's 10, 15 minutes in a week, and it's important and it's necessary. But it's you're right. There's probably other more transformative moments in your week that take place. I would imagine. So you answered one of my questions, which was going to be about notes. The other question I have, well, maybe walk me through your process. So how early in the week do you start preparing? Is it, are you preparing at Kiddush on Shabbos day right after? Does it reset the clock every time or does it depend on the week, or does it depend on what's going on in the world? How does it? What's your, if you have a process, what would that be?
So the ideal process would be to be doing Shnai Mikra v'Yachad Targum, and to be living the week through the active awareness of the Parsha and Chazal on the Parsha. And that way I can make the connections, as the week is going on, to something that's relevant and connected to the Parsha.
Right.
I try to sort of jumpstart that effort by giving a Parsha Shir on Tuesday morning. And that helps me because it forces me to get into, preparation mode and to already be thinking, and engaging with the parsha actively.
Yeah.
That's, sort of part one of the process is like looking at the parsha and starting from there. What often happens, though, is that there's a message or something that's tugging at me, and then I try to work backwards and find something in the parsha that's a hook or that I can connect the dots to.
Right. That's what I was going to ask you about. Is it message first, or do you look in the parsha for something and then like, how do I tie this into something, a message, or do you come with a message and then go looking for the Torah to support it, make it more authoritative?
It's inconsistent. It really it goes back and forth between those two sort of sequences. I would say the drashot on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, I don't go crazy like by preparing them months in advance, but with those I actually try every year to fit into sort of a model of having one being Ben Adam Lamakom and one being Ben Adam Lachavero. So the Ben Adam Lamakom is oftentimes related to Emunah, related to a big, kind of topic around our place in the world vis-a-vis our creator. And the second one is oftentimes more about a social cause, more about character. And so I sort of have those two buckets and try to fit it into the mold. This year, for instance, I did a whole campaign to become a journaler. That was my Ben Adam Lechavero, and I brought the journals that I had written through over the last 15 years and showed them as a prop. And then I got a sponsor to pay for anybody who wanted a journal. And we had, 50, 60 people who signed up and they started journaling, right? So that was sort of the more Ben Adam La'atzmo, kind of introspective. And I had planned that out, 2-3 weeks in advance, and I wrote out the entire thing word for word.
Wow.
But I barely referenced the sheet except for a few formulations when I was actually giving it. But I had already rehearsed it. I had already had most of it in my mind. I had the jokes, I had the closing, I had the transitions, I had the key components of the drasha already well oiled. And then the other one was about seeing our relationship with Hashem as a marriage relationship. And if we can work on our own marriage relationship, using certain tools and techniques of, sort of relationality, then it really enhances our capacity to have an active, emotional relationship with God. So, it's a sort of pretty traditional kind of message, but I rooted it, in the fact that 4 or 5 couples had come to me over the summer essentially and said we've fallen out of love. Like we become co-parents, there's no romance left. We have not really had the spark in a long time, and we're going through the motions, And so I said a lot of us are in that rhythm with God too, and the best way to combat that is A, B, and C, having a date night, and and so I shared, these are messages that are very basic and common, but I put more effort and energy into crafting them in a way that I would hope they would land, because I think on Rosh Hashanah there's a bit more expectation that people are looking for something a little more meaty.
Yeah.
Anyways, so I know I'm going off in terms of like what the process typically looks like.
Great.
But nowadays it's definitely more sort of extemporaneous. Like last Shabbat we had a bat mitzvah. It was last week was a bar mitzvah. This week is a bat mitzvah. We have one every week for the next like 6 weeks. So I tried to speak to the bar bat mitzvah kid, and that's what I was planning to do last week. But then somebody came over and said, "Rabbi, we need to hear you speak. We need some chizuk." So like I just pulled something out that I had not been planning on speaking about, and it was really just like broadcasting live. And so it was unpolished. There were some, I don't know, some like probably, formulations that didn't fully fit. But I think people are okay with it being raw. No one's ever criticized me, for the like the delivery. They've always,
Yeah.
criticized for the content. So,
Yeah. How much
yeah,
of yourself do you share personally in your drasha, if any? I mean, there's a
yeah,
school of
it's a
thought
great,
that some people are, I'm the role model. I have to show leadership. I have to show flawlessness, and I have to, lift people up, and I have to be above everybody in order to be the leader. And then there's other people that lead from the trenches, that lead from the middle, where we're all in this together. But let me show you what's worked for me, or things that I'm experiencing, struggles that I'm having, and here's what I'm doing to work through them.
I try to do both. I would say my natural tendency, or my personality, is to lead from the trenches and to display my humanity by being self-revelatory, to sort of open up and to disclose. And my predecessor was very much not like that. He was very cerebral, really philosophical, a little bit like holier than thou. And so when I came here, the early feedback that I got was like, "Why are you talking so much about yourself?"
Mm-hmm. How does your
And I
family?
said, "Well,
How does your family? Well, finish what you're saying, but I'm curious how your
yeah."
family relates to
And
it
so
as well.
I shared like my style is to start with myself, but then
Mhm.
to not leave it there, but
Yeah.
always to sort of hold myself accountable towards a higher standard, and to sort of um, underscore a sort of aspirationalism, right? This is where I, might be right now, but I'm moving,
Mhm.
right? And so I'm getting closer to the place I want to be. So that's sort of a bridge between those two, I think, sort of like starting points or mentalities. But in terms of how my family, it's mixed. Sometimes my kids appreciate the attention that they get from being highlighted in a drasha, and sometimes they resent it. I've grown over the years, especially with sharing, things about my wife. Like I almost always keep my wife out of it, unless it's something very mundane.
Mhm.
You know, my wife was at the shopping store, and
Yeah.
she was asked at the register if she wanted to make a donation to Israel,
Right.
right? Um,
The fact that
so
your
that
wife is
kind
really
of thing,
relevant. It could have been anybody.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's just a function of boundaries, and trying to keep my kids from resenting my profession completely.
Yeah. That's funny.
um,
Yeah. I'm much of the same camp where I try to share myself. And my wife will often slouch in her seat while I'm talking because everybody turns to her. And that's probably a throw over from my comedy days. But at the same time, I try to make it so that I use myself as a springboard, but then reflect it back to people who potentially are going through similar things. So it's just not all about me. It's just I'm just more the launching pad for it. But
yeah.
yeah. So what I wanted to ask you also was, in terms of speaking, do you ever find yourself having something prepared and showing up Shabbos morning and saying, just, I'm not feeling it. Like I can't say what I prepared. It doesn't just, it's not right. There's something else that's tugging at me. Or do you ever jettison things at the last minute and go off in a different direction?
Absolutely. Um, One of the courses I took when I was a campus rabbi, as you mentioned, and I was able to take some courses in the divinity school. It was a religious, Christian divinity school, and I was sort of, I think, the only Jew there.
Is it
But I
Yale?
took a course. This was at Yale, yeah. I took a course with this professor Tisdale called prophetic preaching. Um, and she was a fantastic, evangelical kind of preacher, tons of energy, give and take with the crowd. It was awesome. It was alive. It was engaging. But one of the sort of pieces that she taught me is that you can't fake it. If you're not feeling it, they're not going to feel it either. Unless you're able to really get into the material, it's going to show. And so based on that, I definitely have jettisoned things, last minute when I was feeling it on a Wednesday and thought I would be feeling it on a Shabbos morning. And I wasn't. And so I, put it on the side burner and went with something else that I, was feeling when I went through the Parsha on Shabbos morning, or when I, on occasion, even just when I'm reading the Parsha and following along in the laning, something will catch me and I'll just go with it on a whim. Because people can detect where there's real sort of authentic passion. And I think sometimes that's more compelling than good content that is dry.
Yeah. I guess they would sense that you're not connected to it. There's disengagement. What would you say is what's some good feedback that you've gotten that you've filed away in your brain, saying like, wow, that shows me that I did a good job. Whether it was an action someone took or something that they said. What do you recall in terms of positivity?
So in my file cabinet behind me, I actually keep a folder of emails that I've received in response to Drashot.
What's the folder called? Accolades?
What? It's called a rainy day folder.
Nice. When you're not feeling good about yourself and you gotta pump yourself up. Is that the idea? Yeah. Sure.
We get beat up often enough.
Yeah.
And so, if I were to take it out now, it would have, at this point, probably over 100 emails that I've printed out over the years of someone on a Monday or a Wednesday saying, Rabbi, I thought about your drasha and I did X, so this week, again, I have a very short-term memory, so I can only remember things that happened in the past few days. I got an email from somebody saying, Rabbi, you spoke beautifully about the Shabbat project and how you were going to invite your non-observant Ukrainian Jewish neighbors across the street over. We decided to do the same, and here who is, this is who's coming, for Shabbat, and I wanted to tell you.
That's nice.
Right? So those are sort of the gems where you can appreciate that maybe you are making small events, shaping life lived together.
Yeah. All right. Now the corollary to that question is what's the worst feedback? What are the times that you really got raked over the coals? You wanted to just not get out of bed the next day. Those kinds of I don't know if it's that dramatic, but.
Yeah, so I mentioned one of them, early on at my time here in Boston. I was getting a lot of harsh feedback about why I was sharing so much about my own life. And, and somebody made a pretty harsh comment of like, it seems really egotistical for you to be showcasing your life over everybody else's.
Right.
And that sort of, there was a piece of truth to that. Even though I was being somewhat self-deprecating most of the time and then showing how I am trying to grow from the experience, they felt like I was putting my own, sort of life front and center, as if everybody should be following me.
The Rabbi Cheses show.
And yeah, and that stung because part of it was accurate, right? Oftentimes the feedback that hurts the most is the feedback that is at least, partially correct.
Sure.
The
criticism, was it face to face or was it an email, or I didn't remember what you said.
We have a Yamim Noraim survey that we send out after Simchat Torah every year, and it came back in like 3 or 4 comments on that form. And so I was reading it,
Mhm.
and knowing that everyone on the board was reading it too.
Yeah. Yeah. Happy day.
Yeah.
So how did you react?
Um,
How did you deal with it?
I think I tried to own the um, the fact that that is who I am. Like, number one, there is a little bit of ego in this role. Like I do enjoy putting myself out there and allowing people to be inspired by my life. Like
Yeah,
I do want to lead by example. Like that is part of my leadership style is, acharai, follow me.
that's great.
Without it being worship or, without it being, kind of celebrity worship, I think there is some power in um, role modeling.
Absolutely.
And I believe that more than what I preach, what I do is going to influence the trajectory of the community.
Yeah.
Um, and so part of it was just like growing into myself a little bit and realizing that this is just a shift from what they're used to, but it doesn't reflect poorly on me.
Hmm.
Um, so that's just maturity, and or becoming more comfortable with my style and not wanting to change my style just because it doesn't work for everybody else.
Yeah.
Um, but it also did, force me to do a little bit of a chashbon hanefesh and to interrogate myself a little bit more when I was sharing stories about myself. Right? Like, am I doing this for myself to show off? Look at me, or am I really doing this because I think this is a relatable example?
Right. And sometimes it's both.
Yep.
That's okay. And I guess, whatever the overriding priority is will influence the decision whether or not to share it.
Yeah. And then I've also gotten negative feedback about some of the positions or content, of the Drasha. So specifically when I've been, talking about Israel over the last few weeks, I've been pretty black and white and said that now is not a time to pray for peace, but to pray for the success of our military operations. And that's not going to lead to peace in the short term.
Hmm.
And so, even though we're saying Ufros Alecha, Sukat Shalomecha, Natata Shalom Ba'aretz, we're saying all of those things, but we don't really mean them for today and for tomorrow. We mean them for the long term. What we really want is, for the success of our soldiers and all the preparations that they've made for the ground invasion to work.
Yeah.
Um, and
I ruffled a few feathers.
we have yeah, I mean, I think that was 95% of the community was on board with that message. And, there's a 5% who feel like, yes, we need to defend our own lives, but putting a siege on Gaza is not the way, to do it. And that we're
Hmm.
being too harsh on innocent life and that we are, we could be doing more to save innocent life from from being taken. Um, and I can appreciate that even if I disagree with it. So I've gotten emails and text messages saying like, Rabbi, I feel out of line with your messaging, um, and that's okay. Taking a position on anything means that not everyone's gonna agree with it.
Hmm.
And I've just become more comfortable over the years with having, dissenters.
Yeah. Just a couple last questions. Do you ever find yourself in a situation where you feel like you need to give some mussar to the congregation, and you want to get up there and just blast them, or lift them up in, I guess, more positive way, but something that really just needs to be addressed, and you feel that this is the form to do it, or do you address it in more subtle ways? Do you ever use the sermon as a slot to kind of say, we need to grow, we need to move, improve in a certain area? Or do you approach change from a different angle?
Yeah, it's very, very rare. And the main reason is because I have been in the audience when I have heard rabbis give that kind of mussar, and I always react by saying, I'm glad he is saying that to that guy.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I'm reacting that way, I can only imagine that everybody else reacts that way
Mm-hmm.
when I try to give mussar publicly.
Yeah.
And so, what I find to be more effective in terms of affecting change is small groups or one-on-one interventions, right? Like the board always asks me to give mussar to the community about the parents who let their kids run around like Vildachayas and destroy our property, right? And I say, like, I'll do it once a year, but what's much more effective is if you give me the names of the children who are breaking our furniture,
Mm-hmm.
I will text the parents to watch their kids more carefully.
Yeah. Sounds much more effective that way. Yeah.
Yeah, because everyone in the community is going to be saying, like, why is he talking? Like, if I'm going to do that publicly, it's just people are going to deflect it.
You ever think that, do you ever address maybe an individual who's sitting there, but you can't really talk to him in person? I'm just imagining a scenario where you want someone to you want to direct your words to him, or her, but you don't actually want to say it to their face. So you kind of veil it within, sandwich it in between other ideas, and hopefully Hamev and Yavin. Do you ever do that? Do you ever find yourself doing that?
Yeah, I've been passive aggressive like that before.
Yeah, call it what it is. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, right.
Um,
How long do
yeah,
you speak for?
it's changed. I think post-COVID, it's shorter. I really tried to hit the 8 to 10 minute mark before COVID, and now I would say it's more in the 6 to 7 minute, kind of range. But I do it in smaller doses. So on a typical Shabbat, I will introduce the Parsha. I'll also introduce the Tefillah for Medinat Israel by sharing something related to Israel in the week before. And then in the Drasha slot, I'll speak about a message. So, and if there's a Simcha, then I'll speak, before the Mishaberach for the kid, and I'll speak after the Bar Bat Mitzvah kid speaks. So it's shorter, sort of nuggets. I think last week I ended up speaking a lot longer because it was just about Israel, and I was just getting personal and emotional, and people needed to hear it, and I felt like I had the whole community. I can feel sometimes, when everyone is just engaged and they're making eye contact and they're just in it. And so sometimes when I get into the zone, and that's happened, I think 3 of the last 4 weeks, I've probably spoken for 12 to 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I'm opening up myself and sharing it with everyone, and it's helpful for people. It's healing. It's comforting, and so I've sort of, in some ways, been like a pastor from the pulpit.
Yeah,
which is like, I mean, my key, I think I'm a good public speaker. I think I'm a better pastor one-on-one,
mm-hmm.
and like, I put much more of my effort on the relationships than on my teaching, because I try to teach through my relationships essentially, and to not have them be such a binary. And I've done continuing education and gotten a degree in mental health counseling, and I pride myself in being much more strategic in those individual relationships. And then sometimes I just let that spill over into sort of the sermon.
Mm-hmm. That mentality, that pastoral mentality.
yeah, of letting the relationship, just seeing people, respecting people, like affirming people, affirming the struggles, and I mean, people want to matter, and oftentimes what they're coming to shul and to participate in community for is to feel like they are, like their lives mean something, and that there's some significance to what they're doing here. And oftentimes that's, an itch that I can scratch, um, by just, affirming that what they're experiencing is real, and that that they're not alone, and that people care about them. Um, and so oftentimes that's, that's often a lot of the messaging that I'll give, on a one-on-one, and on occasion I'll let it spill over, in a sermon slot.
Mm-hmm. What's the demographic of the shul? And do you find yourself sometimes at a loss to be able to reach young, middle-aged, old, all experiencing different parts of life simultaneously? You don't want to scattershot what you say because it'll dissipate the message. But how do you manage that? I mean, I'm assuming that you probably have more than one demographic.
Yeah, we skew younger. The majority of our community is, let's say, 45 and younger. We have about 200 and, I don't know, 25 families, and only, I'm thinking of like two or three members who are like above 75.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I often wonder how to hit all the different demographics. And oftentimes I try to do it through the life cycle moments. Through a bar mitzvah, I really highlight the intergenerationality. Perhaps the younger siblings and the grandparents, and trying to bring it together. So I think I also try to like go to Tat Shabbat, which is like our parents and kids kind of program on Shabbat morning, and speak to them, right? And I try on occasion to go to the Kiddush Club, which often just has older men. So I try to hit different points, but I struggle with like you said, sort of just missing the mark, or in terms of it being generationally relevant. It's part of the beauty and part of the challenge of having a community, is that we're accountable to people in different stages of life, and we often have little patience, for the noise that little kids make once we don't have kids in the house anymore.
Yeah.
And sometimes I like to point that out, the beauty of that, right? That like an all-encompassing stage of life, is forgotten so quickly. And the women who complain to me about how much noise the little kids make in shul, once upon a time had 5 kids in shul. Like that was only 15 years ago,
Yeah.
but now all of a sudden they have no tolerance for it.
Yeah. That's funny. Okay, last question.
Yeah.
You mentioned a little bit about the people that you've looked up to as mentors. Some people from divinity school, and who do you admire in the Jewish world? Which rabbis do you look up to? Do you say, I aspire to that? Were you impressed with, even if it's not your own style? And what about them do you like?
Yeah. I could take an hour to answer that question, but I'll be selective and say that sort of the 2 most influential rabbis in terms of my pulpit, in terms of my sermon style, were the rabbi that I grew up with, my shul rabbi, Rabbi Benji Samuels in Newton. And he is a scholar, and also an incredible pastor, and combines those 2 magnificently. So he was, and he's now a colleague. He came to the area when I was getting bar mitzvahed, and was really a mentor for me in so many ways. Like for instance, he did the Wexner Graduate Fellowship. So I was like, oh, I should do that too. And so I sort of followed his path in many ways. And the irony is that his wife was the dean of students at Maimonides, and now my wife is the dean of students at Maimonides. So we really have very parallel sort of paths. Yeah. He loves like road biking. And that's something I took up as well. And now I do, road biking with my congregants as well. And so there are just a lot of similarities. And he was, sort of a little bit down the highway and a few exits down. And I could, sort of learn from a lot of what he did. And so that's number one. Rabbi J.J. Schachter has also played a pivotal role in my development. He was actually the first rabbi here in Sharon. And so if I have, significant issues, there was the breakaway from the shul here in Sharon when I took a position on an issue related to trans. And so he's the kind of, he was the person I consult to figure out, how to make hard decisions when there are inevitable trade-offs, and you can't keep a community together. So he also has a very fiery, very passionate style in the pulpit. I don't think I go that far in terms of my decibel or my sort of energy, but I pull from that on occasion. And so, but at this time, having been already a rabbi for almost 15 years, I think I learn more from my peers than from my mentors. Like, I have a handful of rabbinic friends who we went through yeshiva together, and those are the people that I, speak to every week. So you probably, remember Shira Willig, and her older brother Simcha is, one of my closest friends. We speak every week. Another friend of mine, Jeremy Donath, is a rabbi of a big shul in Fair Lawn, New Jersey. And so we speak multiple times a week, and we compare our Drasha, we compare, the rises of the rabbinate and the lowest of the lows. And that, I would say, Chaverschaft, that Dibuk Chaverim, is probably what provides the most nurture to me in the stage that I'm at now.
Amazing. Wow. Okay. That was amazing. That was really so enlightening and so interesting. And I'm really glad you made the time for me because it's really, really fascinating. And I know you got to get back to your Friday grind, but it's amazing. I'm glad you made the time.
Yeah. Well, thank you for providing the opportunity for me to reflect on it. Oftentimes I'm going so quickly that I don't have the time to get up on the balcony and see how I'm dancing. So it's nice to have that opportunity. Thank you for providing it.
You've been listening to The Maggid Method, and I'm Daniel Steinberg. Learn more about The Maggid Method at maggidmethod.com, maggidmethod.com. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.